Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. In this video, what I want to talk to you about, fairly briefly, is I want to give you a little bit of a window into how the names of the runes of the Elder Futhark are reconstructed from the evidence we have from later stages of the runic alphabet, considering that the names of the letters in the Elder Futhark are never actually attested from the period when the Elder Futhark was in use. Now, it's the way of YouTube that most videos that you ever make, certainly that I ever make, receive essentially no viewership, whereas, somehow out of nowhere, there's always going to be a couple that no matter how old they are and how imperfect they are, get the lion's share of attention and end up being the most watched videos in most months. And one of those, for me, is this video I made in 2017 about the names of the runes in the Elder Futhark. My video making has come a long way since then, but that video continues to get a lot of attention. And one thing that I mentioned in it is that the names of the runes in the Elder Futhark are not actually attested in Elder Futhark. Right? Elder Futhark goes out of use by about 700, and then it's supplanted in Scandinavia by the Younger Futhark, and in England by what's usually called the Anglo-Frisian runes, or Anglo-Frisian Futhorc. So how do we arrive at conclusions about what the names of the runes in Elder Futhark were? Well, to get some idea of that, we have to know our sources for the names of the runes in the later Futharks, or runic alphabets. So for Old Norse and its Younger Futhark, we have two rune poems. We have the Old Norwegian rune poem and the Old Icelandic rune poem. These mostly give the same names to the runes, although they notably don't give the same name to the fourth rune for nasal A, later O. The Old Icelandic rune poem calls that Os, meaning God. It's the singular of Aesir, gods, the family of gods to which Thor and Odin belong. Whereas the Old Norwegian rune poem calls that Os, right? It's already moving toward using this as O instead of nasal A, and that is the river mouth. Then we have the Old English rune poem, which is a little bit older than both of those, and gives us the names of the runes in Old English and the Anglo-Frisian Futhorc, rather than Old Norse and the Younger Futhark. Now, this is a pretty significant source because not only is it a little bit older, but it actually has names for all of the runes in the Elder Futhark, whereas the Younger Futhark won't give us those because the Younger Futhark is a shorter alphabet than the Elder Futhark. The Younger Futhark goes from the 24 runes of the Elder Futhark into the 16 runes of the Younger Futhark. We don't know why it gets shortened and so many letters get disused, but it does, whereas in England the runes are actually expanded, so we do get names for all of them there. And then another source that's often neglected is in somewhere in the 800s, an English scholar named Alcuin recorded the names of the letters of the Gothic alphabet. Now, Gothic, as we have it preserved, is not written in runes, but in an alphabet devised by Bishop Wulfila, which was mostly based on the Greek alphabet, but which apparently gave the letters names based on the names of the runes, based on the fact that Alcuin gives names for these letters that are extremely similar to the names of the runes with corresponding letter values. Now, Alcuin didn't know Gothic, and these names don't always look particularly like Gothic words, but they are often close enough that we can figure out what the Gothic word that's meant is, and that's very, very often the same as the word in for the rune in the Old English Futhorc, according to the Old English rune poem. So pretty much what we do is we triangulate from these sources. So that gives us, for example, 4 runes that we can be very confident about the name of in Elder Futhark, which are the F, N, J, and M runes. There we have, for example, looking at the F rune, we have Old Norse fe in the Old Norwegian and Old Icelandic rune poems. That means money or cattle. Also Old English feoch, which means money or cattle. And then in Alcuin's write-up, we see the name of that given as fe in Gothic. And of course, we know that the word for cattle or money in Gothic was fehu, thanks to the Gothic Bible, and so fe reasonably well fits that. Notice that Gothic is written in a way that's kind of unexpected. from the perspective of someone who knows how to read other Old Germanic languages. For instance, AI very often actually spells a short eh sound. So you would spell that Gothic word basically F-E-H-U if you spelled it like other Germanic languages. Anyway, triangulating back from there, you can arrive at a pretty certain conclusion that the Proto-Germanic name in Elder Futhark, which Elder Futhark was originally designed for the Proto-Germanic language ancestral to these later languages, you can arrive at the pretty safe conclusion that the name in that language was Fehu, meaning money or cattle. Now, again, that's not written down anywhere in Elder Futhark, but it seems safe to assume. As does the name Neuthes, or need, emergency, for the letter N, Yora, or year, or good harvest, for the J letter, and Manas, man, for the M letter. Notice that with the J letter in Old Norse, J or Y has actually been lost before vowels at the beginning of words, but the name of the rune, which goes on to mean A in Old Norse, still corresponds to the name of the descendant rune in Old English, and the Gothic name recorded by Alcuin, so we can still make a pretty safe assumption that that's the name descended from the same name of Proto-Germanic as the English and Gothic names. Now, what can we do when our sources aren't in that close of agreement? I mean, for one thing, we have fully 8 letters where we don't have a Norse name to work with. Unfortunately, 2 of those are extremely vague. The P rune, which in Old English is called Peorth, and which Alcuin records a Gothic name Pertra for. We can't necessarily say for sure what that means. It looks like it might be something like pear tree. Then we only have an English source for a letter that in Old English is called Eo, yew tree. We don't even necessarily know what this letter meant. It's so seldom used. And the name, meaning yew tree, is given to a different rune, which stands for an R that comes from an older Z in Old Norse. That's the rune Yr, which isn't related to this rune. So we can never really say for absolutely certain what the names of this P and whatever this letter is were in Elder Futhark, or even necessarily what that second one was used for. Then we have problems where the Norse and the English names differ so much that we can't necessarily say which one is older. So for example, the Old English and Old Norse rune poems call the third letter, the th sound, Thors, meaning an anti-god, a so-called giant, one of the monsters. Whereas in Old English that's called Thorn, meaning thorn, and Alcuin records a Gothic name Thith, which looks nothing like either, so it doesn't really help us. Now, most people have assumed that the Old Norse name, which has more of a pagan meaning, right, referring to something from pagan lore, must be the older one because the English would replace a pagan something with a more everyday something rather than vice versa. But I'm not sure that's necessarily true, right? I mean, there's a pagan god's name in the letter T for Tyr. So really either one could be equally old. Maybe it's just different regional variants that don't have any sort of ideological component to them. Kind of like how Americans call the last letter of the alphabet Z and Brits call it Z. You know, there could just be sort of non-competing regional, you know, neutral value judgment variants out there. So maybe this was Proto-Germanic Thurisaz, maybe it was Proto-Germanic Thornus, or Thornaz, Thornaz. But we just don't know, and possibly the 2 names coexisted and were selected in different areas. But overall, the correspondences between the names are close enough, and most of the names in Old English especially are clear enough that we feel reasonably confident in just using the older Proto-Germanic form of the same name, which we can reconstruct thanks to our ability to triangulate from other changes in the language, or from changes that we observe in other words in these various languages. We're reasonably confident that those Proto-Germanic names are well reconstructed, with the exception maybe of the P, and of course the very ambiguous rune that comes right after P, and not being quite sure which version of th or which version of the k rune is the original name. Still, I hope that gives you some insight into how we reconstruct these names. why we're reasonably confident about most of them, and the fact that, like it or not, with Elder Futhark, we're always kind of working from guesswork that's founded on the better tested, although less, to a lot of the internet anyway, exciting later runic alphabets. Well, again, I hope that was somewhat interesting or informative for you. And from beautiful Colorado, let me wish you all the best. Now let me make a quick PSA here. I know many people are, and I'm flattered that many people are interested in coming to the University of Colorado to study with me or take my classes. But remember, as discussed in several videos, I am leaving the Nordic program at the end of spring 2020, so I will no longer be teaching classes like Norse mythology, Icelandic sagas at CU. If those classes continue to be taught at CU, they'll be taught by somebody else. I will no longer have any association with the Nordic program. I will still be at the University of Colorado in an unpaid position as resident scholar, and hopefully during this period I'll have more time to make these videos, which of course reach more people than any classroom ever will, work on my upcoming translations such as the Prose Edda, and work on my class in Norse mythology for the great courses. But please don't come here thinking that I run some Hogwarts for Old Norse. I don't, and you're not going to find that anywhere, actually. There really aren't any good jobs teaching this stuff, and I need to try to make a living. And actually, given the lack of rewards in teaching this stuff in a conventional way in classrooms, I need to take the time away from the classroom to work on these projects that really reach the people that are interested in this stuff, the videos, the books, and now great courses. All right. Well, as always, for beautiful Colorado, let me wish you all the best and good health and the best to you and yours during this whole coronavirus situation in April 2020. All the best.